What's up, everyone? My name is Alan, founder and consultant at For Now Marketing, and welcome to Braze for Technical Marketers. Today, let's go over how to calculate the sum of an abandoned cart using Liquid. So there's going to be a few items in our abandoned cart. We're going to calculate the total sum using Liquid. Let's get started. Here I have a very cool abandoned cart email, which is actually part of our Liquid for Technical Marketers exercises. And we have this dynamic email that will pull all the abandoned cart items from a user profile. So if we go ahead and preview and test, let's try to test it for this one right here. So if I search for user, and you'll notice that this user has an abandoned cart custom attribute. So they're actually, the email is pulling from abandoned cart items. And if we go see it, you'll see that they have this pair of shoes, some pants, and then more pants for a total of 3 different products and 4, but a different quantity for each of them and a different price for each of them as well. Let's actually take a closer look at what that looks like. So if we go to their profile, view nested object, you can see the product name, the price, the quantity, the image link. So we have that information on this user profile. Now, what we want to do is we want to be able to add up the total abandoned cart amount for this user and display it somewhere just in the bottom so that the user knows how much their cart was worth. So how do we go about doing this? So while our for loop is going through every item inside abandoned cart items, we're going to need to do some other calculation as well. So what does that calculation look like? I'm going to go ahead and add a paragraph tag above here, above the N4, but inside the for loop, so I can just see what's going on. And there's really 2 ways to go about it. So the first way is what we call the incremental variable assignment route. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through each item, figure out each subtotal per item, and then keep incrementally adding on to a variable. So we're going to create a variable called assign abandoned cart total. And for now, let's set it equal to 0 because right now we're just starting at 0. So, and actually, we're going to need to do that before we go through the for loop, because if we keep it inside the for loop, then what's going to happen is every time the for loop begins, it's going to reset it. So abandoned cart total will happen first. That variable gets created. And now the for loop goes through. For every time the for loop goes through, what we can do is let's figure out assign subtotal equals, let's see, item dot quantity. So we're going to grab the quantity of the item, then we're going to multiply it by item dot price. And let's see what that gives us so far. Times item dot price. And then let's just try rendering subtotal and see if we get what we expect. So we should see the subtotal for each item at the bottom of every row. And then this might actually make our email look a little bit funky, but that's okay. So we see incremental assignment variable 0, 0, 0. Okay, so something's broken, but you get the idea that the total number is showing up each time. I think Braze doesn't like it if we try to do too many things at once and we try to use too many variables at once. That may be causing some issues. So what I want to try to do is let's first just render each variable that we're using and just confirm, are we seeing everything correctly? So if we do this, we should see hopefully some numbers that way. So we see 1, 140, great, 1, 100, great, and then 2, 100. So we're supposed to multiply these 2 numbers and then store it in a variable called subtotal. Great. Let's try this. This might be a simple fix. Assign quantity equals item.quantity. And then assign price equals item.price here. And what we've actually done is we've added a little bit more labels so that it's clear. So we have quantity and price. And then lastly, what we're going to do is we are going to assign subtotal equals the quantity times the price. And that makes sense. And we actually had some trouble with this at first, but we ended up just having to refresh, save as draft, and rewrite it a few times. And really, honestly, nothing really major happened, but it works now. So if we go to preview, sometimes Liquid can be buggy like that. So subtotal is quantity times price, 140, 100, and 200. Okay. Then the last step we're going to do is we are going to keep a total running tally of a variable called total. Let's assign total. And what is total going to equal to? And here's another here's another example of incremental variable assignment. So we're going to assign total to itself. And we're going to add the subtotal from that for loop. And then let's take a look at what total looks like. But before we go into that, let's actually explain what's happening here. So, and actually at first it might be helpful to assign total or to create abandoned cart total. That's actually the variable that we had created up here. So let's make sure to use that same variable. So what's happening here is we have a variable called abandoned cart total set equal to 0. The first time we figure out the subtotal, abandoned cart is still equal to 0. So by setting it equal to itself, it'll still be 0. But then we're going to add the subtotal from that iteration. So after the first time, let's actually just take a look now at this point. So after the first iteration, subtotal is going to be 140. And then keep that number in mind. And when we go to the second item, oh, the subtotal is not showing up. I realize we are actually still using the old variable name, so we should be adding up or displaying the abandoned cart total. Let's try that one more time. Thank you for your patience here. So there's the total. That total is coming from 0, the original value of total, setting equal to 0, and then adding the subtotal 140. Let's scroll down, and then that total is now the 140 from before. Then we set it equal to 140 again, but plus the subtotal. So now we have a running tally of the total. And the last part is adding the final subtotal, and then now we just have an incrementally increasing total variable that we've built here. So once again, we just grab all our variables, quantity, price, and these are just making sure that our variables are displaying correctly. We first calculate what's called a subtotal by doing quantity times price. So that's the subtotal for each row or each item. And then we keep track of a final abandoned cart total using incremental variable assignment. So that we're assigning it to itself. Abandoned cart total equals itself, but plus the subtotal of the last for loop. And that's the first way we keep track of our total amount, abandoned cart total amount. When the for loop is over, we can throw in something like your cart total is, and then throw in the abandoned cart total amount, just like that. And let's just make sure that that looks okay. So, and that part will not repeat because that was outside of the for loop. So your cart total is 440. That looks great. Number 2 is what I will call the array method. So we can actually store all the subtotals in a array. We can create an array made up of all the subtotals, and at the end we can go ahead and add them all. And the way you create an array is actually very similar to an incremental variable assignment. So it's actually, a mixture of one plus the array, but we'll call it the array method. So what we're going to do is, first of all, let's create another variable up here. This variable has to live outside the for loop because we don't want it to be overwritten every time it goes to the for loop. So we'll call this one assign subtotal array and set it equal to 0 for now. And actually, it may be better to set it to a blank space for now, but let's just continue with 0 for now. And what's going to happen is after every for loop, we are going to assign that same variable from just now, so subtotal array equal to itself, but we are going to append the last subtotal value. So we are going to add the subtotal value, and then we're also going to append a comma so we can actually keep those keep that string separated. So what's happening here is we're building a string. We're first building a string that's going to equal itself, and then we're going to keep adding the last subtotal amount from the previous for loop. And to keep those subtotal amounts separated, we are going to split it with a comma. Let's first see if what subtotal array looks like after every loop. So let's go ahead and check that out. Okay, it took a minute to load, but the array method is we're gonna have 0, 1, 40. So maybe it's not a good idea to store 0 in front. It may still work, but it's just not as clean. But you see that the 100 is getting added after, and then the 200 should be getting added at the end. So right now this is an array method, and that looks okay. I am gonna go ahead and reset our subtotal array from not from 0, but just to a blank string. And yeah, even though we're using numbers, it actually became a string because we added a comma, and a number cannot contain a comma. So when subtotal array is finished, we can once again step outside. So this is, I'll do incremental variable assignment, your cart total is, and then I'll do array method. So we're going to step outside of the for loop because we are done going through it. And what we're going to do is we are going to assign subtotal array to itself one final time. But then what we're going to do is use the split function. So every time you see a comma, it's going to split it and create an array. So then now what we can do is we can actually go through every item of the array. So what I can do is now it just becomes an array. Let's just see what happens if we go ahead and loop through each item. Or actually, we're not looping through. We're just manually calling each item just to make sure that they're all there. And they are all there. Great. And then really the array method, as I continue doing this, is really just the incremental variable assignment over and over again. So we're going to create a new cart total 2. So for route number 2, that's going to be equal to, and actually we need to go through another for loop. So for item in subtotal array. Let's see. We are going to assign cart total 2 equal to cart total 2 itself. And then we are going to add the item amount. So once again, cart total 2 may need to be defined outside of the for loop. And we're going to go through a for loop with the array that we just created, the subtotal array that we just created, go through every item and assign cart total 2 equals cart total 2 itself plus the most recent item that we just went through and 4. And then lastly, let's take a look at cart total 2. So really, as I mentioned, this array method is just incorporates an array. But even with an array and even within this method, you notice that, and even with the creation of the array, we notice that the incremental variable assignment idea is really relevant, just really multiple times in the array method. So I would say a lot less efficient method, but you just get to see how an array works. So that's kind of cool. Let's see what happens when we display it and scroll down to the bottom. So once again, we are building the array as we go. 140, 140, 100, 140, 100, 200. And then, looks like we have an issue. So let's go fix that. Okay, so here's actually a really interesting observation. Our code looked okay. But what happens if we use a paragraph block inside the drag and drop editor is there may be some unintended line breaks and other HTML code that gets hidden behind the scenes. So this was actually breaking. So all we did was add this inside an HTML block. So we went to advanced HTML block, and then I will go ahead and actually throw in some line breaks so that it's a little bit easier to see. But that seemed to actually do the trick. So let's scroll down, and then we have cart total 2 is 140, and then 240 after the second time, and then 440 after the third time. And let me just go ahead and add your cart total 2 is, and 2 is just because the second way we use to calculate this. And that's much more clear. Your cart total 2 is 440. So we were successful in rendering and figuring out the abandoned cart total for both ways. Something that we just learned with the array method is just to be careful, and that it really just uses the incremental variable assignment route multiple times within. And that's this idea of constantly assigning a variable to itself. It's a very powerful idea in Liquid. That's it for today. Thank you for watching and see you next time.